In psychology, they say that one of the strangest paradoxes of human existence is loneliness in a crowd, surrounded by voices, laughter, conversations, and movement. Some people feel more isolated than if they were sitting in an empty room. It is a silence that hides beneath noise, a distance that exists even when bodies are close, a void that is not measured in meters, but in connection. This kind of loneliness is invisible. On the outside, everything seems normal. The person smiles, nods, joins the small talk. To others, they appear present. But inside, there is a disconnect, as if a pane of glass separates them from the rest of the world. They hear the words, but cannot feel their warmth. They see the gestures, but cannot believe they are meant for them. They move with a group, but feel like an outsider tagging along. Psychologists suggest that this loneliness is not about the number of people around us, but about the quality of connection. True belonging is not measured by proximity, but by resonance. The feeling that someone understands, someone sees, someone cares. Without resonance, even the largest crowd becomes an empty place. Often, those who feel lonely in crowds carry a deep belief that they are unseen or misunderstood. Maybe in childhood they felt invisible, their needs unnoticed, their feelings dismissed. Maybe in adolescence they tried to fit in, but never felt accepted. These early experiences teach the mind a cruel lesson. Asterisk, even when you are with others, you are still alone. Asterisk, and the body remembers, repeating that script long after the original story has ended. In psychology, they say that loneliness in crowd is one of the most painful kinds of solitude because it reminds us that we can be surrounded yet unseen, included yet excluded, loved yet unknown. And until the wound of disconnection is healed, no number of people will ever fill the silence within. In psychology, they say that loneliness in crowd does not wear one face. It wears many. It sneaks into dinners with friends, into family gatherings, into busy offices, into parties filled with laughter. On the surface, life seems full, messages, meetings, conversations. But inside, there's a quiet ache, a sense of being surrounded yet untouched, included yet unseen. In relationships, this loneliness can be the most painful. A partner may sit right beside you, share meals, share a bed, share years of life, and yet a gulf remains. The critic in the mind whispers, asterisk, they don't really know you. They wouldn't stay if they saw all of you. Their love is routine, not real. Asterisk, instead of feeling secure in closeness. The person feels more alone with their partner than when they are truly by themselves. The contradiction is unbearable. To be loved yet not feel it. To be held yet not feel connected. In friendships, loneliness takes another form. Surrounded by familiar faces, the person laughs at jokes, nods in conversations, adds their piece of the circle, but feels like they are acting. Their presence feels hollow, like they are performing a role rather than belonging. They wonder their friends would notice their absence, or if their place in the group is replaceable. And so, despite being invited and included, they feel like outsiders rehearsing lines in a play they never auditioned for. At work, loneliness often hides behind professionalism. People collaborate, attend meetings, share goals. But deeper connection is absent. Small talk fills the air, but it feels mechanical, shallow. The person feels invisible beyond their productivity, valued for output, but not for who they are. In crowded offices or bustling workplaces, they feel the paradox most sharply, to be part of a system yet disconnected as a human. Even within families, loneliness can bloom. Gatherings are filled with chatter, traditions, obligations. Yet beneath the surface, some members feel unseen, unheard by parents, overshadowed by siblings, misunderstood by relatives. The family may insist, asterisk, we're close, we're always together. Asterisk, but closeness without emotional understanding is its own kind of isolation. And for the one who feels it, this loneliness stings even more, because family is where belonging should feel strongest. Psychologists explain that this kind of loneliness is not about absence of people, but absence of resonance. Humans are wired not just for company, but for connection, for the feeling of being understood, valued, mirrored. Without this resonance, no number of bodies in a room can fill the void. The result is a life filled with activity, conversation, and presence, but starved of intimacy, meaning, and belonging. In psychology, They say that loneliness in a crowd is proof that proximity is not the same as connection. We can be surrounded, yet starving for recognition. We can be spoken to, yet never truly heard. We can be loved, yet never truly known. And until we find resonance, the crowd remains as empty as silence. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd rarely appears without roots. It is not simply the product of shyness, nor only the result of circumstance. It grows out of earlier experiences, moments when connection was longed for but denied, when presence was offered without resonance, when the heart learned to equate togetherness with emptiness. By the time adulthood arrives, the pattern feels permanent. People are everywhere, yet belonging is nowhere. For many, the roots begin in childhood. Some children grow up in homes filled with noise but starved of attention. Parents may be physically present but emotionally absent, too busy or too wounded themselves to notice their child's inner world. The child learns early, even when people are here, I am unseen. The result is not only sadness, but a blueprint for later life. In crowds, in families, in relationships, that same invisibility repeats. Others experience direct rejection. A child who longs to join a game, but is laughed at. A teenager who reveals their true feelings and is mocked. A young person who dares to be different and is punished for it. Each humiliation carves a scar, teaching a lesson that showing up authentically is unsafe. So even as adults, these people may stand in rooms filled with laughter yet feel alone because they're convinced no one would accept the real version of themselves. Adolescence strengthens the wound. This is the age of comparison, when belonging feels fragile and every mistake feels fatal. Those who fail to fit in may carry that exclusion into adulthood. They remember the cafeteria tables where they had no place, the parties where they were outsiders, the silences where their words carried no weight. And though the setting changes, the memory of exclusion shapes the nervous system. The crowd, no matter how warm, feels like a repetition of rejection. Trauma deepens the root. For those who have faced abandonment, betrayal, or loss, closeness itself feels dangerous. The mind says, if I rely on others, I will be hurt again. The body prepares for disappointment even before it arrives. In this way, the person can be surrounded by love yet feel utterly alone, because trust has been fractured at its core. The crowd becomes a reminder not of safety, but of what could be taken away. Psychologists call this phenomenon learned isolation. It is a belief that connection is impossible, even when it is available. The person no longer searches for resonance because they assume it cannot be found. Instead, they participate on the surface, laughing, nodding, contributing, while internally feeling separate. The performance hides the pain, but the pain never leaves. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd is not born in the present moment. It is the echo of the past replayed in the present. Until the echo is named, until the roots are uncovered, every crowd will feel like a repetition of the same lesson. Together yet apart. Seen yet unseen, present yet profoundly alone. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd, when left unresolved, does not remain an occasional ache. It becomes a way of existing. The person learns to function, to smile, to participate, but beneath the surface, they move through life as if they were only observing, never belonging. The world becomes a theater, and they, though present on the stage, feel more like an audience member watching others live. This lifestyle is subtle. On the outside, nothing seems wrong. They attend birthdays, contribute in meetings, answer messages, laugh at the right times. Yet inside, there's always distance. They speak, but their words feel detached. They listen, but their heart does not register the warmth. Every interaction is filtered to the quiet thought, I am not truly part of this. Over time, this distance reshapes identity. The person stops expecting connection. They no longer search for people who might truly understand. Instead, they settle into roles, colleague, friend, partner, that they perform with skill but without depth. Life becomes about fulfilling obligations, not creating resonance. The script is followed, but the meaning is missing. This way of living has costs. Joy feels muted because it is always experienced from behind glass. Achievements feel hollow because there is no one they believe would celebrate them deeply. Even sorrow feels lonely, because when tears come, the person assumes no one could meet them in that pain. The critic inside whispers, asterisk, they wouldn't understand. They don't want the real you. Asterisk, and so, instead of reaching out, they withdraw further, convinced that isolation is safer than disappointment. Psychologists describe this state as functional disconnection. The person is not visibly broken. They still work, socialize, maintain relationships. But inside, they live half a life. They are present but not rooted, surrounded but not supported, connected but not known. And because this pattern feels normal after years, they may not even realize they're living in survival rather than fulfillment. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd becomes most dangerous when it stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like identity. At that point, the person does not think, asterisk, I am lonely. Asterisk, they think, asterisk, this is simply who I am. Asterisk, and in that belief, they surrender the possibility of ever truly belonging. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd is not just an emotion. It is a weight the body carries, a fog the mind breathes, a cage the soul inhabits. Left unspoken and unresolved, it begins to seep into every layer of existence, shaping not only how a person feels but how they function. What starts as an ache of disconnection becomes a constant burden, pressing down on energy, clarity, and hope. Psychologists warn that chronic loneliness activates the same survival systems as physical danger. The nervous system remains on edge, scanning for threats that never come. Stress hormones spike, sleep becomes shallow, muscles tighten. The body, designed to recover through connection, instead stays in defense. Over time, this wear and tear leads to fatigue, illness, vulnerability to anxiety, and depression. Loneliness in a crowd is not just in the mind. It leaves fingerprints on health. Emotionally, the burden grows heavier. Joy feels muted, dulled by suspicion. When laughter erupts around them, the lonely heart wonders, asterisk, are they laughing with me or without me? Asterisk, when love is offered, it feels conditional, temporary, fragile. Even victories lose flavor, because celebrations shared without true connection taste empty. The critic inside whispers, asterisk, no one really sees you. No one would notice if you vanished. Asterisk, and the more these whispers repeat, the more they feel like truth. Dreams are among the first casualties. To dream is to imagine a future with meaning, with companionship, with belonging. But for someone convinced of perpetual disconnection, dreaming feels dangerous. Why hope for a life that will never arrive? Why risk disappointment again? And so ambitions shrink, passions dim, creativity fades. The person may still function, may still work and contribute, but the spark of vision grows faint. The crowd outside bustles with life, while inside, the dreamer quietly withers. Psychologists describe this as existential fatigue. It is not the exhaustion of muscles, but of meaning. A person can be physically active, socially present, even outwardly successful, yet feel drained in spirit. They move through the motions of life without tasting its depth. The loneliness they carry is invisible to others, but it is a constant shadow they cannot escape. In psychology, they say that loneliness in a crowd is not just the absence of connection. It is the erosion of self. It strips away joy, dulls desire, weakens the body, and silences dreams. And unless it is met with recognition and healing, it convinces the person that this muted, half-lived existence is all they will ever have. In psychology, they say that one of the most common responses to loneliness in a crowd is to wear a mask. To the outside world, the person looks fine, engaged in conversation, sharing a smile, nodding along, playing their role in the scene. Inside, however, they feel hollow, aching, disconnected. The mask is not meant to deceive out of malice. It is meant to protect. It says, asterisk, if I pretend belong, maybe no one will notice that I don't. Asterisk, this mask of normalcy is perfected over time. The person learns the right responses, the expected laughter, the polite words. They become experts at camouflage, blending in so well that others would never suspect their inner silence. Colleagues see a competent professional. Friends see someone who is always there. Families see someone participating, contributing, smiling, but none of them see the truth. That every performance drains energy, that every social moment feels like a quiet act of survival. The tragedy of the mask is that it prevents rescue. If others cannot see the pain, they cannot meet it. And if the lonely person never risks removing the mask, they never give anyone a chance to prove that connection is possible. The mask keeps them safe from judgment, but also keeps them cut off from authenticity. They live among others but feel unseen, not because no one cares, but because they never dare to reveal. Psychologists explain that this strategy is rooted in fear. Many who wear masks once tried to show their true selves and were met with rejection, ridicule, or indifference. The lesson was absorbed. Asterisk, to be safe, you must hide. Asterisk, and so adulthood becomes a series of disguises. Professional competence, social ease, family participation, none of which reflect the raw truth inside. Over time, the mask fuses with identity. The person begins to wonder, asterisk, am I anything beyond this performance? Do I even know who I am without it? Asterisk, this loss of authenticity deepens the loneliness. Even when someone offers love or friendship, it cannot land fully, because the mask, not the self, is the one being loved. And deep down, the person thinks, asterisk, if they only knew the real me, they would leave. Asterisk, in psychology, they say that the mask of normalcy may protect us in the short term, but in the long run, it suffocates us. It denies us the intimacy we crave, the belonging we need, the recognition we long for. And until the mask is lowered, the loneliness behind it will remain unseen, unhealed, and unbearably heavy. In psychology, they say that every mask eventually cracks. A person can only pretend for so long, only carry silence for so many years, before the weight of their hidden loneliness becomes unbearable. The moment of breaking rarely arrives in grand gestures. It often begins quietly. A conversation where the mask slips. A night when the laughter feels too forced. A gathering where the person suddenly realizes they're exhausted from playing a part. And in that exhaustion, the truth emerges. Asterisk, this performance is killing me. I want to be seen. Asterisk, the turning point is rarely neat. At first, showing vulnerability feels like walking into danger unarmed. The critic inside screams, asterisk, don't do it. They will judge you. They will leave you. Asterisk, but beneath the fear, there's a flicker of courage. The instinct that whispers, asterisk, maybe, if I risk it, someone will finally understand. Asterisk, for some, this moment arrives in relationships. They confess to a partner, asterisk, I feel alone even when I'm with you. Asterisk, for others, it surfaces with friends. Asterisk, I know I laugh with you, but inside, I feel disconnected. Asterisk, sometimes it happens in therapy, where the words finally break free after years of silence. Asterisk, I don't feel like I belong anywhere. Asterisk, each confession is terrifying, but each is also liberating. For the first time, the person allows themselves to be known without disguise. What follows is not always instant healing. Sometimes others don't understand. Sometimes people respond awkwardly, even dismissively. But sometimes someone stays. Someone listens. Someone answers not with judgment, but with recognition. Asterisk, I've felt that way too. You're not alone. Asterisk, and in that moment, the glass wall that once separated the person from the world begins to crack. Psychologists describe this as a beginning of authenticity, the courage to risk being seen, flaws and all. It does not guarantee belonging, but it creates the possibility of it. Masks may protect from rejection, but they also block intimacy. Removing them is dangerous, but it is the only path to real connection. In psychology, they say that the moment a person dares to show their true loneliness, the silence begins to shift. For the first time, they are no longer actors in play, but participants in life. And even if the world does not always respond with perfect understanding, the act of revealing plants a seed, that perhaps belonging is possible, not by hiding who we are, but by daring to reveal it. In psychology, they say that healing from loneliness in a crowd begins the moment vulnerability is allowed. When the mask slips, even slightly, and another human being responds with recognition rather than rejection, a seed is planted. the seed of possibility. It is small, fragile, easily doubted, but it is also powerful because it contradicts the old script that said, asterisk, you are always alone. No one can truly see you. Asterisk, at first, this shift feels unfamiliar. The person may struggle to believe it. Asterisk, did they really understand me? Or are they just being polite? Asterisk doubt lingers because years of disconnection cannot vanish in a single moment. Yet something has changed. For the first time, the silence is shared. The loneliness, once private and suffocating, has been spoken aloud and survived. And that survival creates courage to try again. Psychologists describe this stage as the opening of trust. It does not happen quickly. The nervous system, trained for years to expect rejection, remains cautious. But each time vulnerability is met with kindness, the body learns a new lesson. Asterisk, connection is possible. I can risk showing myself and still be safe. Asterisk, this rewiring is slow, but steady. Over months, sometimes years, the person begins to believe not only in others, but in their own worthiness to belong. In relationships, the transformation is profound. Instead of performing roles, the person starts to show more who they are. Their fears, their desires, their quirks. At first, it feels dangerous. But when these truths are accepted rather than punished, intimacy deepens. A partner's love feels real for the first time because it is love for the authentic self, not the mask. The gulf that once separated them begins to narrow. In friendships, walls come down. Jokes are still shared, but now so are insecurities. Outings are still enjoyed, but silence between friends no longer feels threatening. The person stops asking, asterisk, would they notice if I was gone? Asterisk, and begins to feel the answer in action. They are valued, not for performance, but for presence. Even in larger crowds, something shifts. The person may still feel moments of disconnection, but the despair lessens. Instead of believing, I will never belong, they think, asterisk, I may not connect with everyone, but somewhere I can. Asterisk, this reframing changes the entire experience of being among people. The crowd no longer feels like proof of exile. It feels like possibility waiting to be discovered. Psychologists emphasize that connection does not erase loneliness completely. Even the most loved people feel alone sometimes. But when the mask is lowered and trust begins to grow, loneliness no longer feels permanent. It becomes a season, not an identity. And in that realization, the person begins to reclaim not just relationships, but life itself. In psychology, they say that the journey from loneliness to belonging is not about being surrounded. It is about being seen. And once a person dares to risk that, the crowd begins to change. What once felt like an endless wall becomes a place where bridges can finally be built. In psychology, they say that the greatest victory over loneliness in a crowd is not when the room changes, but when the heart does. At the beginning, the world feels hostile, a place full of people yet starved of connection. Every laugh sounds distant. Every gesture feels hollow. Every presence reminds you of absence. But as healing unfolds, the same world begins to look different. Not because the crowd is transformed, but because the self has dared to step out from behind the mask. The final stage is not about never feeling lonely again. Even the most connected hearts sometimes ache in silence. The difference is that loneliness no longer feels eternal, no longer feels like destiny. Instead, it feels like a passing cloud, real but temporary, shading the sun without extinguishing it. The person who once believed, I will always be unseen, now knows, asterisk, I can be seen if I risk being real. Asterisk, this truth reshapes identity. The mask, once a second skin, begins to dissolve. The self that was hidden, silenced, disguised for years, steps forward into light. Relationships become deeper because they are built on authenticity. Friendships become truer because they are no longer performances. Love becomes richer because it is offered to the real person, not a carefully curated version. And in that acceptance, the once lonely heart discovers what it means to truly belong. But the transformation does not stop with the self. Those who have walked through the desert of loneliness become guides for others still wandering. They recognize the silence in another's smile, the exhaustion in another's performance, the distance in another's presence. And instead of judgment, they offer compassion. They say, asterisk, I know that feeling. I carried it too. You don't have to carry it alone. Asterisk in this way, the cycle of disconnection begins to break, not only for one, but for many. Psychologists call this integration, the point where wounds become wisdom, where scars become strength, where silence becomes empathy. The loneliness that once suffocated is not erased, but transformed into something meaningful. It becomes proof of survival, fuel for compassion, evidence that belonging is possible even after years of exile. In psychology, they say that the final truth of loneliness in a crowd is this: connection begins not when a crowd changes, but when you dare to show yourself within it. The pain was real, the mask was heavy, the silence was long, but none of it was permanent. Belonging is never about numbers. It is about resonance. And once you discover that resonance, even in a single voice, the crowd is no longer empty. It becomes a place where you are not just present, but alive,